Sergeant Elias Cade stood near the back wall of the observation terrace and tried his best to look invisible. That was not hard for a human on Verath Prime. Nobody noticed humans here. Nobody cared about them. The orbital city floated above a gas giant so large that its storms could swallow Earth whole. And the terrace offered a view of those swirling clouds through a floor made of transparent crystal. Hundreds of alien diplomats stood on that crystal floor, drinking strange liquids and talking about trade agreements and territorial borders. Elias was just the security guard standing in the corner. He watched them move around the room. The Draven were the tallest. They looked like lizards that had learned to wear suits. Their ambassador, a creature named Sorath Kel, stood nearly 8 feet high and spoke with the calm, flat voice of someone who had never been surprised by anything in his entire life. The Kithari were insectoid creatures that moved in pairs and finished each other's sentences because their minds were linked together. The Torvan were ancient beings that looked like trees made of smoke, and they rarely spoke at all. And then there were the Veilshi. They were the most beautiful species Elias had ever seen. Their bodies were made of something like living crystal, and they glowed with soft light from the inside. Their children glowed even brighter. Elias had noticed the little one almost immediately when the summit began. She was maybe 6 years old by human standards. Her name was Yili, and she clung to her parents' leg and stared at everything with wide, shining eyes. She reminded Elias of his niece back on Earth, small and curious and completely unaware of how big and dangerous the universe really was. Elias shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His earpiece crackled with routine check-ins from the other human contractors on the station. Everything was quiet. Everything was boring. He had been on Verath Prime for 3 months, and nothing had ever happened. Then the floor moved. It was not a big movement, just a shudder, like the station had taken a breath. Elias felt it through his boots, and his hand went to the railing beside him. A few of the diplomats paused their conversations. Someone laughed nervously. Then it happened again, harder this time. The crystal floor cracked. Not a small crack, a crack that ran from one end of the terrace to the other, like a river made of broken light. Elias heard the deep metallic groan of the support beams underneath the terrace, and he knew that sound. He had heard it before on a colony world, when the ceiling of an underground shelter had given way. It was the sound of something about to fall. Everything happened fast after that. The main support beam on the east side of the terrace snapped. The entire platform tilted 15 degrees. Diplomats screamed and slid across the crystal floor. Tables and chairs crashed into the railing. Elias grabbed the wall behind him and held on. He saw a Draven diplomat lose his footing and slam into a pillar. He saw Kithari scrambling over each other in panic. And he saw Yili. The little Veilshi girl had been separated from her parent when the floor tilted. She slid across the smooth crystal surface like a stone on ice, her small hands grabbing at nothing, her glow flickering with fear. She hit the railing at the edge of the terrace, the railing that was already bent and broken from the structural failure. The metal gave way. Yili went over the edge. Her parents screamed. It was a sound Elias would never forget. It was not a word in any language. It was the raw, broken sound of a parent watching their child fall. The Veilshi parent tried to run, but a fallen beam had pinned their leg to the floor. The Draven were calculating. He could see it in their cold eyes. They were measuring distances and angles and probabilities, and they were not moving. The Kithari had pulled into a tight cluster, protecting their own. The Torvans simply watched. Nobody was moving toward the edge. Elias did not think. His body moved before his brain caught up. He pushed off the wall and sprinted across the tilted, cracking floor. His boots slipped on the crystal. He jumped over a fallen chair. He dodged a sliding table. The edge of the terrace rushed toward him. He could see the open shaft beyond the broken railing. It dropped 9,000 feet straight down into the atmosphere of the gas giant. Wind howled up from below like the mouth of a living thing. Yili was hanging from a twisted piece of metal with one small hand. Her crystal fingers were slipping. Elias dove. He went flat on his stomach and slid across the last few feet of floor. His arm shot out over the edge, and his hand closed around Yili's wrist. He caught her, but his momentum did not stop. His body kept sliding forward, over the broken edge, into the open air. He twisted as he went over. His left leg hooked around a piece of bent rebar that stuck out from the shattered floor. The metal bit into his leg, and he felt his femur snap. The pain was so sharp and so sudden that his vision went white, but his hand did not open. His fingers stayed locked around the small, glowing wrist of the child. He hung upside down over the abyss, one leg hooked in rebar, one hand holding Yili. His other hand grabbed the jagged edge of the broken floor, and he felt the metal slice into his palm, down to the bone. Blood ran down his arm and dripped into the endless drop below. Yili looked up at him. Her eyes were wide and full of tears that glowed like tiny stars. She was shaking. She did not speak his language, but her eyes said everything. "Please do not let me go." The rebar groaned. It was bending under their combined weight. A Draven engineer near the edge looked down at them with his cold, yellow eyes. He checked a device on his wrist. Then he spoke in a flat voice that carried across the broken terrace. "The structural tolerance of that anchor point is insufficient. The human's mass combined with the child's exceeds the limit by 14%. If the human releases the child, the load decreases enough for the anchor to hold until rescue arrives. If he does not release her, both will fall in approximately 40 seconds. Silence. Every alien on the terrace heard those words. Elias heard them too. He understood them perfectly. The math was simple. Let go of the girl and live. Hold on and die. He looked down at Yili. Her small fingers had wrapped around his wrists now, holding on to him the same way he held on to her. She was so light. She weighed almost nothing, and she was so scared. The rebar bent another inch. Metal screamed against metal. Elias tightened his grip. "Then we have got 40 seconds, he said. The rebar should have broken. Every calculation said it would. The Draven engineer had checked his numbers twice, and the numbers did not lie. The metal was going to snap, and the human and the child were going to fall 9,000 feet into a gas giant's atmosphere and burn up like paper in a furnace. But a Cathari engineer named Thresh did something that no one expected. She broke from her cluster. Her hive partners called after her, confused and alarmed, because Cathari did not act alone. They never acted alone. The hive decided, and the individual obeyed. That was the rule. That had always been the rule. Thresh did not listen. She ran to the edge with a plasma welder in her 4 hands, and she fused a secondary support beam to the rebar just as it was about to give way. The metal held. 3 more Cathari followed her, then a Draven, then 2 others. They built a makeshift anchor in 11 seconds. Someone pulled Yili up first, then Elias. When they laid him on the cracked crystal floor, Elias was barely conscious. His left leg was bent at an angle that made several aliens look away. His right hand was open to the bone. Blood pooled beneath him, dark red and warm. His eyes were glassy. His skin was the color of wet cement. But he was breathing, and Yili was alive. They rushed him to the medical bay on the station's central ring. The alien physicians who treated him were Silanth, a species of tall, thin beings with 6 fingers on each hand and a deep understanding of biology. They had treated hundreds of species over many centuries. They thought they understood how bodies worked. Humans surprised them. The lead physician, a Silanth named Doravan, stood over Elias and watched the monitors with growing confusion. The human's body was doing things that should not have been possible. His heart rate was dangerously high, but it was not slowing down. His blood pressure had dropped to a level that would kill most species, but his organs were still functioning. His brain was still active. His muscles were still tense, still locked in the position of holding something that was no longer there. His body does not know the danger has passed, Doravan said to her assistant. It is still fighting. She ran more tests. She found chemicals flooding his bloodstream that she had never seen in such concentrations. Adrenaline, cortisol, endorphins. His body had released a cocktail of survival chemicals so powerful that it had essentially overridden the normal process of dying. His nervous system had suppressed the pain signals from his shattered leg and torn hand so that he could keep holding the child. His heart had increased its output beyond safe limits to keep blood flowing to his brain and muscles. The human body, Doravan realized, had a hidden mode. When someone it cared about was in danger, it could push past every safety limit it had. It could ignore broken bones. It could ignore blood loss. It could ignore the screaming signals from every nerve that said stop, give up, let go. The body would destroy itself before it would allow the person to fail. She had never seen anything like it in any species. Doravan published her findings on the medical networks that evening. By morning, every physician in the Galactic Concord had read them. By the next day, everyone else had too. The footage of the rescue was everywhere. Someone on the terrace had been recording when the structure failed, and the video showed everything. It showed the floor cracking. It showed every alien species freezing in place. It showed a single human sprinting across the tilting platform and diving over the edge to catch a child that was not his, that was not even his species, that he had no biological or social reason to save. And it showed the moment the Draven engineer told him he would die if he did not let go. Every species in the galaxy watched Elias Cade tighten his grip on that small, glowing wrist. They watched him say those 5 words, and they did not understand. Ambassador Sorath Kell watched the footage 17 times. He sat in his quarters on Verath Prime with the lights dimmed and the video playing on a loop, and he tried to find the logic. Sorath was Draven. His species had built their civilization on logic, on reason, on the careful calculation of cost and benefit. Every action had a purpose. Every decision had a mathematical foundation. This was how intelligent life was supposed to work. Elias Cade's decision had no mathematical foundation. The cost was his life. The benefit was the survival of a child that was not related to him, not part of his social group, not even part of his species. By every model of behavior that Sorath knew, the correct action was to release the child. The loss of one young Velshi was tragic but acceptable. The loss of the human was unnecessary and avoidable. But the human had chosen death. Sorath could not let it go. He visited Elias in the medical bay 3 days after the incident. The human was awake but weak. His leg was in a regeneration cast that the silent physicians had designed specifically for his biology. His hand was wrapped in synthetic skin. He looked small in the alien medical bed, fragile, breakable. Sorath stood over him and looked down with his yellow, unblinking eyes. "You knew you would die," Sorath said. "The engineers stated the calculation clearly. You understood it. I saw your face in the video. You understood." His voice was rough and quiet. "Then why did you not release the child?" Elias looked at the ceiling for a long time. Sorath waited. The Draven were patient. They could wait for hours if necessary. "Because she was scared," Elias said finally, "and I was the only one close enough to matter." Sorath stared at him. He waited for more. A deeper explanation, a logical framework, a cost-benefit analysis that he had missed. But there was nothing more. That was the entire reason. The child was scared. He was close, so he held on. Sorath left the medical bay and walked to his quarters in silence. He sat in the dark for a long time. Then he opened his personal terminal and began researching human history. He started at the beginning, and he did not stop. Meanwhile, the galaxy was talking. On every station, on every colony, on every homeworld, the video played, and the discussions grew louder. Most species were confused. The Draven called it irrational. The Kithari debated it in their hive links for days without reaching consensus. The predatory Vrexel watched it and called it weakness. But the Torvan elders, the oldest living species in the Concord, did something unusual. They went silent for 3 full days. No communications, no statements, no contact with any other species. And then, on the 4th day, they released a single message to every network in the galaxy. It was short. It said, "We have not seen this behavior since the architects vanished. Watch the humans carefully." Nobody knew what it meant, but everyone felt the weight of it. And on the far side of the galaxy, the Veilshi government sent a formal request to the human embassy on Varith Prime. They wished to speak with the species whose member had saved one of their children. A Veilshi child had not been saved by an outsider in 12,000 years. Something was changing. Elias did not know it yet. He was just lying in a medical bed, staring at the ceiling, flexing the fingers of his damaged hand, and wondering if he would ever hold anything again. He did not know that he had already held something the galaxy could not let go of. The grand chamber of the Galactic Concord was the largest room ever built by intelligent life. It sat at the heart of Varith Prime like a cathedral made of light and stone. Its ceiling was so high that clouds sometimes formed near the top. Its walls were lined with the banners of 600 species, each one representing a civilization that had earned its place among the stars. Humanity's banner hung near the bottom, in the back corner, where new species were placed. It was small and plain. Nobody looked at it. Ambassador Sorath Kel walked to the central platform and looked out at the assembled representatives. He had spent 4 weeks researching. He had not slept in the Draven way during that time, entering only the most shallow rest cycles, because every time he closed his eyes, he saw the video again. The human diving over the edge, the human holding on, the human choosing to die. Sorath had read everything. He had accessed every human database that was available through the Concord's networks. He had read their history, their literature, their news reports, their military records. He had watched thousands of hours of footage, and what he had found had broken something inside his carefully ordered mind. "I asked the human why he did not release the child," Sorath began. His voice was calm and measured, as it always was. The chamber was silent. Every representative was watching. This session had been requested by the Torvan elders themselves, and the Torvan did not make requests lightly. He told me it was because the child was scared, and he was close enough to help. I found this answer unsatisfying. I believe there must be a deeper explanation, a cultural obligation, a religious command, a social contract, something that would explain why a rational being would choose certain death for a stranger. He paused. His yellow eyes moved across the chamber. There is no deeper explanation. This is simply what humans do. He activated the display system. A holographic screen appeared above the central platform, large enough for every being in the chamber to see. I will show you what I found. The first image was from a human conflict called World War II. It showed a young soldier falling on top of a small explosive device to shield others from the blast. Sorath explained it in simple terms. The soldier knew he would die. He did it anyway. The people he saved were not related to him. Some of them he had met only days before. The second image was from a natural disaster. A massive wave of water had destroyed a coastal city. The footage showed ordinary humans, not soldiers, not trained rescuers, running into the water to pull strangers out of collapsed buildings. Many of them drowned. The third was a recording from a burning structure. Human firefighters entered the building knowing the roof was about to collapse. They carried out 3 children. 2 of the firefighters did not come back out. Sorath showed them more. A woman jumping into a frozen river to save a dog she did not own. A man stepping in front of a vehicle to push a stranger out of its path. A doctor working for 36 hours without stopping to save patients during a disease outbreak, until her own heart gave out from exhaustion. He showed them a recording from a human war zone. A medic running across open ground while weapons fired all around him, reaching a wounded soldier and shielding the soldier's body with his own while he treated the wounds. The medic was shot twice. He finished treating the soldier before he allowed himself to collapse. The chamber was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of boredom or agreement. The deep, heavy quiet of something shifting. Something being understood for the first time. I have studied the biology, Sorath continued. Humans have a chemical response in their bodies that activates when others are in danger. It suppresses their own pain. It increases their strength. It makes them faster. Their bodies are designed at the most basic biological level to sacrifice themselves for others. Not just for their own offspring, not just for their own species, for anyone. He let that sit for a moment. I then studied their culture. They have a concept they call heroism. Every human civilization, on every continent of their world, across every period of their history, has stories of individuals who gave their lives for others. They teach these stories to their children. They build monuments to these individuals. They consider this behavior the highest possible expression of their species. A Kithari representative raised a limb. This is kin selection, she said. All species protect their genetic relatives. This is basic biology. No, Sorath said, it is not. I anticipated this objection. The humans I studied did not sacrifice themselves for relatives. They did it for strangers. They did it for members of enemy nations. They did it for animals. They did it for beings they had never met and would never meet. He paused. The human on the terrace did it for a Velshi child. He had no genetic connection, no social connection, no logical reason of any kind. The Kithari representative sat down slowly. A Vrexel commander in the upper tier stood up. He was massive, nearly 9 feet tall with armored skin and 4 arms. His species ruled through strength and fear. They were the galaxy's most feared warriors. This is weakness, the Vrexel said. His voice was deep and rough. A species that throws away its members for no strategic gain is a species that will destroy itself. It is something to pity. Sorath looked up at him. For the first time in his life, the Draven ambassador felt something that was not logic. He was not sure what to call it. I considered that possibility, Sorath said, but I found a problem with it. Humans have existed as a species for approximately 300,000 years. They have fought constant wars. They have suffered natural disasters, plagues, famines, and conflicts that would have destroyed any other species in this chamber. They should have gone extinct dozens of times. He turned back to the full chamber. They did not. They survived everything. And do you know why? Because every time their civilization was about to fall, individuals stood up and chose to die so that others could live. Their species does not survive despite this behavior. Their species survives because of it. The chamber was silent again. Sorath looked at the Vrexel commander. You call it weakness. I have spent 4 weeks studying these creatures. I have read their history cover to cover. I have watched them charge into fire, into flood, into war, into certain death, again and again and again across 10,000 generations. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. That is not weakness. That is something we do not have a word for. And that, Commander, is what should concern you. The Vrexel commander said nothing. He sat down. The Torvon elder in the corner of the chamber shifted. Smoke curled from its ancient body. It spoke for the first time in the session, and its voice was like wind moving through old stone. The architects built the pathways between stars, the elder said. They created the framework on which every civilization in this concord was built. They were the most powerful species to ever exist, and before they vanished, they left a single record. Most of you have never heard it, because we did not believe it was relevant. The elder paused. It said, "When the soft ones hold on, the galaxy begins again." The chamber erupted. 600 species began talking at once. Arguments broke out between delegations. The Vrexul were furious. The Kithari were confused. The Veilshi were weeping with light. And in a medical bay on the far side of the station, Elias Cade was sitting on the edge of his bed, trying to stand on his broken leg for the first time. He did not know about the session. He did not know about the prophecy. He did not know that 600 species were arguing about whether he was a saint or a warning sign. He just wanted to walk again. So he put his weight on his shattered leg, and he gritted his teeth against the pain, and he took one step. Then he took another. Because that was what humans did. They held on. They kept going. Not because it was logical, but because something deep inside them, something older than language, older than civilization, older than thought itself, refused to stop. The Vrexel Dominion did not believe in miracles. They believed in teeth and claws and the cold logic of predators. They had built the largest military force in the galaxy, not through diplomacy or trade, but through simple, brutal dominance. When you were bigger, stronger, and more willing to kill than everyone else, the galaxy tended to move out of your way. The events on Verath Prime irritated them. One human had grabbed one child, and suddenly the entire Concord was calling humans special. The Torvon were quoting ancient prophecies. The Veilshi were weeping. The Kithari were having philosophical crises. All because one small, fragile creature had done something stupid and gotten lucky. Commander Rethax of the Vrexel Third Fleet decided to prove a point. The human on the terrace was an accident, a single defective individual who had malfunctioned at the right moment. If you put humans in a real situation, a situation where the cost was clear and the danger was real, and the odds were impossible, they would do what every other species did. They would protect themselves and let strangers die. Rethax arranged the test carefully. A refugee transport carrying 400 alien civilians was traveling through a quiet sector near the edge of human-patrolled space. The transport carried families from 6 different species, including children. Rethax hired pirates to disable the transport's engines and life support. The pirates would threaten the passengers and create a situation that looked real and dangerous, but was actually controlled. A human patrol vessel would be nearby. The humans would see the distress signal. They would calculate the risk, and they would do the smart thing. They would call for backup and wait. The plan did not survive contact with humans. The ESV Carthage was a small frigate with a crew of 60. It was not a warship. It carried light weapons and basic defensive systems. Its captain was a woman named Lena Vasquez. She was 41 years old, with short gray hair and calm brown eyes, and a quiet voice that her crew had learned to obey without hesitation. She had served in the human navy for 19 years. She had never lost a crew member under her command. She intended to keep it that way. When the distress signal came in, Vasquez was on the bridge drinking coffee. She set the cup down. She read the signal. A civilian transport with 400 passengers, engines dead, life support failing, armed hostiles on board. How far? She asked. 12 minutes of full burn, her navigator said. Nearest backup? The cruiser Miyamoto, 47 minutes out. Vasquez did the math. 47 minutes was too long. Life support on a disabled transport would fail in 30. The passengers would start suffocating in 20. She did not hesitate. All hands, battle stations, set course for the transport, full burn. Her first officer, a young man named Torres, looked at her. Captain, the hostiles have at least 3 armed vessels. We are outgunned. I know. We should wait for the Miyamoto. Those people will be dead before the Miyamoto arrives. Torres opened his mouth to argue. Then he closed it. He had served under Vasquez for 2 years. He knew that look. It was not anger. It was not recklessness. It was something quieter and much more dangerous. It was the look of a person who had already made her decision and was simply waiting for reality to catch up. The Carthage burned hard toward the transport. 12 minutes later, they arrived to find something worse than expected. The pirates were not acting like pirates. They were acting like soldiers. Their ships were better armed than the intelligence suggested. Their movements were coordinated in ways that street criminals never managed. Vasquez noticed this. She filed it away. It did not change anything. Launch boarding pods, she ordered. Marines first, security teams follow. I want every passenger off that transport alive. The Carthage's Marines were not elite special forces. They were regular soldiers, men and women who had signed up because they wanted to protect people. They wore standard armor and carried standard weapons, and most of them had never been in a real fight. They went anyway. The boarding pods slammed into the transport's hull and cut through. 28 Marines poured into the corridors of the disabled ship. The pirates were waiting for them. The first corridor was a killing ground. 2 Marines went down in the first 10 seconds. The rest pushed forward. Corporal Ade Okonkwo was at the front. He was 26 years old, born in Lagos, and he had joined the Navy to pay for his mother's medical treatment. He was not a hero from the story. He was a regular person who had made a practical decision. But when the shooting started, and the aliens in front of him were bigger and stronger and better armed, something inside him switched on. The same thing that had switched on inside Elias Cade. The same thing that had driven humans to run into burning buildings, and dive into frozen rivers, and charge across battlefields for 10,000 generations. Ad did not retreat. He pushed forward. He fired until his weapon overheated. He picked up a fallen alien weapon and kept firing. When a Vrexel mercenary, because that was what they were, stepped into the corridor ahead of him, Ad did not flinch. The Vrexel was twice his size, covered in natural armor, carrying a weapon that could cut through a ship's hull. Ade shot it in the knee, and when it fell, he climbed over it and kept moving. The Marines fought through the transport corridor by corridor, room by room. They were outnumbered and outgunned. They took terrible casualties. But they did not stop. Every time a Marine fell, the one behind stepped forward. Every time a doorway was blocked, someone found another way through. They fought like water, flowing around every obstacle, filling every gap, never stopping. The Vrexel mercenaries had been told this would be easy. They had been told humans were soft and weak and fragile. They had been told that humans would retreat when the cost became too high. But the cost kept climbing, and the humans kept coming. The mercenaries started to feel something they had never felt before. It was not pain. It was not tactical concern. It was fear. The turning point came in Cargo Bay 4. The passengers were there. 400 aliens huddled together in the dark, parents holding them, and between the passengers and the Vrexel mercenaries stood 6 human Marines. 6. Ade Okonkwo was one of them. He had been shot twice. His left arm was useless. His armor was cracked. He stood in the doorway of the cargo bay with his weapon in one hand, and he looked at the Vrexel soldiers, and he did not move. A Vrexel squad leader came around the corner with a squad of 8. They were fresh, unhurt, fully armed. They could have gone through the 6 Marines in seconds. But the squad leader stopped. He looked at the humans. He saw the blood on their armor. He saw the wounds they were ignoring. He saw the emptiness in their eyes that was not despair, but something else entirely. It was the look of creatures who had already accepted death and simply had not gotten around to it yet, because they were busy. The squad leader made a call to Commander Rethax. "Abort the operation," he said. Rethax was furious. "You outnumber them. Advance." "No," the squad leader said. And then he said something that would be repeated across the galaxy for years to come. "These creatures do not behave as prey. They do not behave as predators. They behave as something we have not encountered. They fight as though every life on this transport is their own child. I will not spend more soldiers against this." He cut the communication and withdrew his squad. The other mercenary teams followed. They left the transport, and they left the sector, and they did not look back. The Carthage sent medical teams aboard. They found the Marines scattered through the corridors. Some were sitting against walls, too tired to move. Some were treating each other's wounds with shaking hands. Some were not moving at all. 18 humans died on that transport. 18 men and women who had woken up that morning expecting a normal day. Captain Vasquez walked through the transport after it was over. She stepped over the blood and the broken metal and the spent ammunition. She checked every room. She confirmed every passenger was alive. 400 civilians, all safe. Then she went back to the Carthage. She stood in the cargo bay, where the body bags were laid out in a row. 18 of them. She knew every name. She had written every letter of commendation and every next of kin notification herself. There was no ceremony that day, no speeches, no medals. The crew gathered in the cargo bay, and they stood in silence. Someone read the names out loud. 18 names. Then they stood for 1 minute in silence. That was all. The Vrexel had wanted to prove that humans were nothing special, that Elias Cade was a mistake, that when the cost was real, humans would make the rational choice. They had proven the opposite, and the galaxy watching again was no longer confused. 6 months had passed since a human sergeant had caught an alien child on the edge of an abyss and refused to let go. In that time, the galaxy had changed more than it had in the previous 1,000 years. The grand chamber of the Galactic Concord was full. Every seat was taken. Every balcony was packed. Species that had not attended a session in decades had sent representatives. The ancient Torvan had sent 3 elders instead of the usual one. The Veilshi delegation glowed so brightly that the lighting in their section had been dimmed to compensate. Even the Vrexul had sent someone, though the single representative sat alone in the upper tier and did not speak to anyone. This was the most watched broadcast in galactic history. Every station, every colony, every homeworld with a receiver was tuned in. Trillions of beings across thousands of worlds were watching and waiting to see what would happen next. Elias Cade walked into the chamber, through the main entrance. He walked slowly. He still used a cane. His left leg worked, but it would never be what it was. His right hand was new. The Veilshi had gifted him a cybernetic replacement, grown from their own crystalline technology. It looked almost human, but when the light hit it at certain angles, it glowed faintly, the same soft blue as Yili's skin. He wore his old military uniform. It was clean and pressed, but it was not fancy. No medals, no ribbons. Just a simple gray jacket with his name on the chest. He looked like what he was, an ordinary man who had done something and was still trying to understand what it meant. They had asked him to speak, not the politicians, not the generals. The galaxy wanted to hear from him, from the man on the video, from the man who held on. But first, others spoke. The Veilshi ambassador came forward. She was tall and radiant, her crystal body shifting through colors as she moved. She spoke in a voice like wind chimes. 6 months ago, a human saved a Veilshi child. This has not happened in 12,000 years. Among our people, The bond between a child and the one who saves them is the most sacred thing that exists. It is older than our civilization. It is older than our language. It is written into the structure of our crystals. She turned to Elias. Sergeant Cade, the Veilshi people wish to perform the rite of binding. We wish to make you kin. You will be the first being outside our species to receive this honor in our entire recorded history. Yili will be your bonded. You will be hers. This cannot be undone. This is forever. Elias stared at her. He opened his mouth, he closed it. He looked down at his glowing hand. Then he nodded, because he did not trust his voice. The Kithari representative came next. She was smaller than the others, with delicate limbs and large, multifaceted eyes. When she spoke, her voice was thin and precise. The Kithari have operated on hive consensus for 9,000 years. The individual does not choose. The hive chooses for the individual. This has been our strength. It has also been our limitation. She paused. After the event on the terrace, a Kithari engineer named Thresh broke from her hive and acted alone to save the human and the child. She was the first individual to break consensus in over 2,000 years. She was not punished. She was studied. And what the hives found changed us. She looked at Elias. Since that day, 412 Kithari individuals have chosen to act outside hive consensus. They have saved strangers. They have taken risks. They have done things that the hive would not have approved. And they have done it because a human showed them that an individual can matter. That one person, acting alone, without permission, without consensus, without logic, can change everything. The Torvan elder moved forward. Smoke and shadow curled around its ancient form. It had existed for over 1,000,000 years. It had watched civilizations rise and fall and rise again. When it spoke, the entire chamber held its breath. The architects walked among the stars before any species in this chamber had learned to use fire. They built the pathways. They seeded the worlds. They created the conditions for all of us to exist. And then they vanished. No one knows why. They left behind only structures and silence and one single record. The elder's voice deepened. That record said, "When the soft ones hold on, the galaxy begins again." For 1,000,000 years we did not know what it meant. We thought it was a riddle, a metaphor, a broken fragment of a dead language. We were wrong, and it was about them. The elder turned its vast smoking form toward the small human section of the chamber. It was about the humans. The chamber stirred. Whispers moved through the crowd like wind through grass. Then the Vrexel representative stood. The chamber went silent. The Vrexel was enormous. His armored skin was scarred from decades of combat. He walked down from the upper tier with heavy, deliberate steps. Each footfall echoed in the quiet chamber. He stopped in front of Elias Cade. He looked down at the human. Elias looked up at him. The Vrexel was 3 times his size. His 4 arms could have broken Elias in half without effort. The Vrexel reached to his belt and drew a blade. It was old. The metal was dark and pitted with age. It was a war blade, and among the Vrexel it was the highest honor that existed. It was given only to those who had done something that a Vrexel warrior could not explain. Something that broke their understanding of strength and death, and what it meant to fight. The Vrexel knelt. The biggest, most dangerous creature in the chamber knelt in front of the smallest, most fragile one. He held out the blade in all 4 hands. "You broke us," the Vrexel said. His voice was rough and low. "My soldiers are the finest warriors in the galaxy. They fear nothing. They have fought every species and won. But they retreated from your people on that transport. Not because your soldiers were stronger. Not because they were faster. Not because they had better weapons." He paused. "They retreated because they looked into your soldiers' eyes and saw something they did not recognize. Something that no amount of armor or training or genetic engineering can create. He placed the blade at Elias's feet. You fight as though every stranger is your own blood. We do not know how to defeat that. We are not sure anyone can. Then he stood and walked back to his seat without another word. Finally, Ambassador Soroth Kell took the central platform. The Draven who had started this. The cold, logical, calculating reptilian who had watched the video 17 times and could not find the math that explained it. He looked different now. Something in his eyes had changed. He stood straight and tall, but there was a weight in his posture that had not been there 6 months ago. After the Concord session where I presented my findings, I did something unusual for a Draven, Soroth said. I went to Earth. The chamber listened. I spent 3 months among the humans. I visited their hospitals and watched their doctors work for days without rest to save patients they had never met. I visited their disaster zones and watched ordinary people, not soldiers, not trained professionals, ordinary people dig through rubble with their bare hands to find strangers trapped underneath. I visited a station where humans called firefighters lived, and I watched them eat breakfast and laugh and tell jokes. And then I watched an alarm sound, and I watched those same laughing, joking humans run toward a burning building without a moment of hesitation. His voice was steady. It did not crack. Draven's voices never cracked. But something beneath the words trembled. I sat with an old human woman in a place they call a hospice. She was dying. She had days left to live, and she spent those days knitting small blankets for babies in a hospital she would never visit, for children she would never meet. I asked her why. She said because the babies might be cold. He paused. The chamber was completely still. We were asking the wrong question. The question is what makes humans love? Because they love recklessly, irrationally, unconditionally. They love things that are not them. They love things that will never repay them. They love things they have no biological reason to protect. And they will die for that love without hesitation. He looked at the chamber. 600 species, thousands of representatives, trillions watching across the stars. We have built empires on logic, on survival, on cold calculation. We have conquered stars and mastered physics, and extended our lives across millennia. But they have built something we cannot measure, something we cannot replicate, something that every species in this chamber abandoned long ago because it was inefficient, because it was irrational, because it did not make sense. His voice dropped. And deep in our most ancient memory, every species here knows what we lost when we evolved past it. The motion was to elevate humanity from Tier 4 status to Tier 1, the highest tier, the tier reserved for species that had shaped the galaxy itself. In the entire history of the Concord, no species had ever jumped more than one tier at a time. The vote was unanimous. Humanity's banner was moved from the back corner to the center of the chamber wall. It hung there, small and plain, among the vast and ancient banners of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. It did not look like it belonged. But then again, humans never looked like they belonged anywhere, and they kept showing up anyway. That evening, after the ceremony and the speeches, and the endless handshakes with beings whose hands were not really hands, Elias Cade sat in a garden on Verath Prime. It was quiet there. The plants were alien. The flowers glowed. The sky above was the swirling atmosphere of the gas giant, orange and gold and impossibly vast. He heard small footsteps behind him, crystal footsteps that chimed softly on the stone path. Yili climbed into his lap without asking. She was warm against his chest. Her glow brightened when she was close to him, the way Veilshi children glowed brighter when they felt safe. She settled against him and looked up at his face with those wide, shining eyes. Elias, she said. She had learned his name. It was one of the few human words she knew. Hey, little one, he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked a question. Her parents had helped her learn the words, and she said them carefully, one at a time. "Why did you catch me?" He looked down at her, this small glowing creature that was not his species, not his blood, not his responsibility. This child he had almost died for. He thought about the question. He thought about all the complicated answers he could give. The speeches, the philosophy, the biology. Then he smiled. Because you needed someone to. Yili thought about this. She considered it with the serious concentration that only children can give to simple things. Then she asked one more question. Would you do it again? Elias did not hesitate. He did not pause. He did not calculate the odds or weigh the costs or consider the probabilities. He answered the way humans had always answered, since the very first one of them reached into the dark to pull a stranger to safety. Every time. Yili smiled. She pressed her face against his chest, and her glow spread across them both like warm light. And somewhere across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, 1,000 different species, looked up at the stars and felt something stir. Something old. Something they thought they had outgrown. Something that had no name in their languages, because they had forgotten it so long ago that even the memory of forgetting was gone. But the humans remembered. They had always remembered, not because they were smarter or stronger or more advanced, but because they were the species that held on, in the cold, in the dark, in the face of certain death. When every rational mind in the galaxy said let go, the humans held on, and the galaxy would never be the same.